Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why strength is the foundation of everything that we do in fitness. And I might not even always agree with Jeff Cavalier, but he said in a video the other day, which I covered, he even said, look, strength is the foundation of everything that we do. And he meant like what he does with everyone that he works with. And people need to understand that when we're talking about training and fitness and athleticism, that's absolutely true. Strength is the foundation of all human movement. Then I'll get to in a minute why it's the foundation of your actual health and fitness. But what I mean is, if you don't have some basic strength, you can't move. You can't pick anything up. And I don't mean heavy things. The actual ability to reach over and pick up a tool and use it, or to stand up and walk, is a display of strength. Now, it's not a very impressive display of strength, but that is a display of strength because what is strength? Strength is defined as the production of force against an external object or an external resistance, right? So if you're able to lift yourself up out of bed and stand up, that is strength. It's a very small amount, but it is strength. Unless you happen to weigh 400 or 500 pounds, then it might be a decent display of strength. Picking up an object, any object, even a 3-ounce object, is still a display of strength. It's a production of force against an external object. When we start thinking about all of this the way that applies to different sports, what are we talking about? When someone runs, or they sprint, or they jump, particularly if they jump. Now, if someone makes it a really high jump in any sport, let's say a basketball player, he jumps up and dunks a basketball. That is a display of strength. That's a display of strength and explosiveness. And explosiveness is about displaying strength over time, right? It's how quickly you can display that strength. All of these things are strength training. So when people see us talking about doing heavy squats or heavy overhead presses or heavy deadlifts, all these things that we're doing, these carry over to these other attributes. Now, I'm not saying that it's necessary for someone to have a 600-pound deadlift in order to be good at sports or to be fit. Well, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that strength is the foundation of all human movement, and particularly as it applies to sports. We know that sprinters are usually really strong squatters. There are sprinters, world-class level sprinters out there who, when they get in the gym and lift, they've been seen squatting 500 and 600 pounds on a barbell. Is that any surprise? But more importantly, when it comes to even more endurance-related things, strength improves work capacity. Anyone notice that some of the best world-class level endurance athletes, like even Lance Armstrong, and I know a lot of people don't like to use him because of the drug situation in the past, but Lance Armstrong did heavy barbell squats. He did heavy free weight exercises. It improved his work capacity even as a primarily endurance athlete. I mean, and he's a serious endurance athlete. That's not just like a minor amount of endurance training. It's not someone who runs a marathon every now and then. He was an extreme endurance athlete. And yet he did heavy squats, heavy leg exercises. Why? Because it improves work capacity. In fact, if you take someone who has been doing squatting and no cardio versus someone who's been sedentary, and let's say they weigh the same body weight, you take two people, two men roughly the same height, same weight, let's say they weigh 170 pounds. One of them has been doing heavy squats for the past year, and the other one hasn't been doing any resistance training, and you take them out running, which one's going to have the better work capacity? The guy who squats by a large margin. Even though he may not have much endurance because he hasn't been training it, he's still going to have more. And if you have both of them start running, and you see where they're at after a month of doing cardio, the guy who started way, way stronger from doing squats is going to have a much better endurance and cardiovascular capacity. He's going to have a lot more work capacity as a result of that strength. Because it's still a display of strength in a way. It's just small amounts of the strength displayed over and over and over. That's still what endurance work is. There's a muscular endurance component, not just a cardiovascular endurance component. So strength is the foundation of all of this. Well, what happens when we start looking at all these other fitness things? And I don't just mean athleticism. What happens when we start looking at health markers, disease rates? Strength actually seems to matter more than cardiovascular capacity. And that's one of the big ones. And I'm not saying people shouldn't do both. I'm not saying there isn't a place for both. In a perfect world, you would be extremely strong and have good cardiovascular conditioning if you wanted to maximize your health, right? But if you only picked one, which one has the most benefits? Strength. When we look at the newest data that came out in the last few months on heart attacks, the researchers are actually saying that resistance training and strength training seems to be slightly better for preventing heart attacks and cardiovascular disease than cardio is. Now, again, they also highlight the point that in a perfect world, you would have both. I mean, if you really want to bring that risk factor down, you would do both, right? But if you only did one, it seems the strength training is slightly better. About things like cancer, resistance training and strength training is the single most important factor, lifestyle factor that we found for reducing cancer rates. Obesity and not smoking being very, very close behind it, like not being obese. But isn't weight management and body fat management easier when you have more muscle from strength training? Of course it is. Strength training reduces cancer rates enormously, like by 50% every single type of cancer. It increases the chances of surviving cancer if you get it. What about diabetes? People who strength train get diabetes at 70%. 70% of a lower rate for type 2 diabetes. How about bone density, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis? Enormous. Take me, for example. You guys saw my DEXA scans, years and years of heavy lifting. In my 40s, I have bone density that is dramatically higher than even the average 20-year-old in my 40s. Well, the research is overwhelming as far as osteoarthritis and osteoporosis. Strength training and any load-bearing lifts, I'm not talking about strength training where you get on a machine. I'm talking about where the weight presses down on you. Big structural exercises. Examples. What do I mean by that? Squats, deadlifts, standing presses. Those are perfect examples, right? They almost completely eliminate osteoporosis. In fact, we see people who have lifted weights their whole lives, when they get to their 80s and sometimes their 90s, they still have good bone mineral density. Right? This is enormous. It's enormous. Alzheimer's, dementia. Anyone look at the research there? People who have the strongest legs getting into old age have the lowest rates of Alzheimer's. They have lower rates of dementia. They have better memory and cognition. Strong legs is linked to staving these things off. So when we say that strength training is the foundation of fitness, I do mean that literally. Strength is the foundation of not only athleticism, not only of human movement, but of fitness and health itself. Now, when you make that statement, everyone wants to come in, no, you're wrong because you should eat a good diet, or you should do this and you should do that. But like, no one's saying you shouldn't. In fact, if you don't eat a reasonable diet, if you have nutrient deficiencies, it's much harder to get strong anyways, isn't it? You know, so that's the thing that I would say to people. If a person wanted to maximize their strength, they probably do need to eat a good diet. You know what? It's probably a good idea to not be really obese either, and to carry 40 or 50 extra pounds of body fat. Sure, that's great for health and fitness. I would agree. But what does the research show? The research shows that people who are strong and have more muscle mass actually get less negative benefits from being obese. Their body fat doesn't affect them quite as negatively. It still affects them, but not as much. In fact, someone who's skinny with too little muscle, like sarcopenia, is actually less healthy when they're underweight than someone who's carrying an extra 30 pounds of body fat with a lot of muscle and strength. Their health is actually worse. So we can talk about these other factors. They're important. They matter. Absolutely. They absolutely matter. A good diet's important. Keeping a reasonable amount of body fat's important. Having good conditioning is important. They're all important. Not smoking cigarettes, not doing street drugs, those things are all important. No one's going to argue against that. But it doesn't change the fact that strength is still the foundation. That is your most important factor. It's just that in a perfect world, if you did everything perfect, you would pay attention to all of these things. But that doesn't change the fact that strength and strength training itself is the most important element. It is the foundation of all human movement, all human athleticism, and even health and fitness to a very large degree. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.